Hello and welcome back. Now that you're here, we can begin the 500 subscriber special. In this video, we'll be going over the vast majority of Jujutsu Kaisen characters to rank them in a tier list as quickly as possible. It is important to understand the context of this tier list. I am not ranking the characters based on their ability to solo the verse or based on who is the most powerful directly. Instead, I have drafted 10 specific metrics that I have rated on a scale of 1 through 10, and then I collect the total, an average score of basically every curse user in the entire verse and rank those scores to determine the best cursed users overall. For example, a character like Takaba, who would normally rank highly due to the raw power of his curse technique, will only make it to mid C tier on this list due to his lack of barrier techniques, IQ, and reverse curse technique. Now that you understand the basic premise, I'll be going through the list tier by tier, starting from the bottom and working up to what I've calculated to be the best overall cursed users in all of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe. Just before we get into it, I'm going to challenge you to lock in your top 3 overall curse users in the comments. And if at least 2 of our choices match up, you should subscribe. And if they don't, I'll make a video on one of your top picks in the comments. With all the setup out of the way, let's begin. Starting strong in F tier, we have a few familiar faces from the Hidden Inventory arc. Riko Amanai, basically 0 feats, and she'd be a totally regular person if it weren't for her being born a star plasma vessel. Next on the list are the Flyheads and the titular Inventory Curse, who are literal fodder that Toji uses to distract those who try to sense his presence. And the Inventory Curse just barely takes the top spot between the two of them due to its unique ability to shrink itself and its stomach contents to conceal Toji's equipment and his invisible guts. Next is Misato Kuroi and Rin Amai. Misato is Riko's caregiver, and they are both non-combatant sorcerers. The key difference between them is the Rin seems to be an inferior fighter, but he actually has a curse technique, placing them in the same spot. Tied with Rin and Misato is Reimi, the scorpion-haired helpless girl from Megumi's portion of the Culling Games arc. Not hard to see how she ended up this low, and finally rounding out the lowest tier, Akari Nita. The saving grace that earns her the top of F is her high level of competence and IQ that she showcased when investigating the bridge at the end of Season 1. Next up is D tier, which is not terribly controversial. Ijichi earns his spot just above Akari due to the barrier techniques that he used against Sukuna and the meager talent he honed as a student before Gojo convinced him to give up his life as a sorcerer. D tier is mostly made up of curse users who have a serious weakness in either their physicals, cursed energy fundamentals, or they're being held back by a weak interpretation of their curse technique. For example, Shoko has found her home in the higher end of D tier due to her overall lack of feats and low level of combat power. Her amazing reverse curse technique has boosted her pretty far from F tier, but on a list like this, characters who are highly specialized will always suffer. On the other end of the spectrum, Ranta Zenin is at least a semi-grade 1 level sorcerer, but he only manages to make it to the top of D tier due to his total lack of barriers or reverse curse technique, in addition to his technique essentially amounting to a far weaker version of cursed speech. C tier is where you'll begin to notice characters who can be considered somewhat well-rounded and capable of handling missions or tasks with only limited assistance. We start off by throwing Hana Karusu into the bottom of C tier due to her consistent fumbles, and even Angel's epic powers can't salvage Hana's overall lack of jujutsu skill. 3 of Geto's trusted allies have found their way here due to essentially having no showings at all, and they only scale to the confidence they have in fighting Kusakabe and Shibuya and their implied level due to their position in Geto's group, which is a hierarchy primarily based on strength and talent. One important thing to note is that the main tier list graphic is actually missing Mimiko, who is supposed to be between Geto's elephant curse from Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and Toge Inumaki due to her technique essentially being a conditionless voodoo doll, power-crept straw doll technique. Combined with her scaling to Nanako and her ability to spam her technique against Jujutsu managers without being tired like Nanako does, indicates a high reserve and efficiency, which places her a fair amount higher than most expected her to be on this list. Hardly any C+ tier curse users can be considered weak at all. These are competent, well-rounded characters that either lack a curse technique, healing, or barriers, and fail to excel in any specific category. Junichi Zenin is a perfect example of how an otherwise solid curse user can lag to the lower half of the tier list just due to low cursed energy efficiency and a total lack of barrier techniques and reverse curse technique. The norm going forward will reflect this, as a lot of fan-favorite characters like Mei, Panda, Naoya, and Noritoshi Kamo will excel in battle but lack the edge that characters with more diverse skill sets enjoy later on in this list. For example, Ui actually ranks higher than his sister on this list due to his technique's insane potential, as not only is he able to reach Malaysia in less than 2 hours from Shibuya, he is also able to swap people's souls, which implies great manipulation and IQ. And finally, he is the designated anti-domain technique user of the two, which grants him a small barrier score due to simple domains. B tier is a realm dedicated to the most specialized curse users and general powerhouses respectively. You'll notice many extremely high tier fighters here, such as Miguel, Nanami, Kusakabe, Todo, and even Naobito Zenin. But they all fall short when it comes to reverse curse technique, and Miguel and Nanami have no barrier techniques at all, and Kusakabe has no curse technique, so it's easy to see how they fall short of the top tiers when it comes to overall mastery of the power system, despite their amazing physicals. B+ tier is home to those just on the cusp of perfect usage of Jujutsu. For the most part, these characters are masters in almost every metric, but characters in this tier tend to have at least one glaring weakness that just barely hold them back. For example, Choso still hasn't demonstrated any kind of barrier techniques despite being powerful enough to tank Malevolent Shrine and battle Kenjaku. Likewise, Geto suffers from having no confirmed domain or reverse curse technique. Even though it's highly likely that he could do either of those techniques, there is no room for speculation on this tier list, except for one A tier character that we'll get to later. The trend continues for Hakari, who has the worst test scores, Kashimo, who has no healing and poor barrier use, and Yuta, who is very physically weak. It is basically impossible to have reached the heights of A tier without at least partial mastery of everything the Jujutsu Kaisen power system has to offer. Yorozu and Uraume are the only exceptions to this rule, and it is dubious at best if that's even accurate. Yorozu hasn't officially used reverse curse technique, but given the context that she has extreme IQ, masterful use of all other forms of Jujutsu, and the ability to fully heal herself via incarnation, it's fair to assume that she wouldn't have used reverse curse technique even if she was able to, considering she was basically uninjured the whole fight until she was beaten in a single blow and decided to give her own life. The healing from her incarnation would most assuredly take priority over reverse curse technique in a situation like that, but she still chose not to use it. Uraume, on the other hand, is the only character on the entire list that I failed to rank objectively, as I personally find it impossible that she cannot expand her own domain. This is the same sorcerer who survived being hit by a 200% hollow purple, dusted herself off, and intercepted Kashimo instantly from hundreds of feet in the air, and has been able to fight Hakari for around 25 chapters straight at this point. Not to mention that she is Ryomen Sukuna's right-hand man, and she would be the only character from the Heian era not to use domain expansion, which is particularly hard to believe based on how common they used to be, and how skilled she clearly is. Apart from those two Heian era outliers, the A tier is complete with curse users who are masters of almost everything they do. Finally, we've reached the S tier. The gods of the Jujutsu Kaisen power system, who can be more easily measured by the things they can't do rather than what they can. Jogo and Cursed Rika exemplify the peak of what a cursed spirit can be, having perfect control over their energy and techniques, and insane physical stats. They both sport the trump card of a fully formed domain expansion, and literal infinite cursed energy respectively. Maki and Toji are both fully realized humanity in its purest form, and they are the absolute best at physical stats, which is essentially all they have at their disposal. The only thing separating them is Toji's genius-level intellect when it comes to planning and strategizing his battles, which gives him the slightest edge over his more average IQ counterpart. Yuki Tsukumo, Satoru Gojo, and Kenjaku have all reached the absolute pinnacle of Jujutsu. All of them undoubtedly have peak IQ, cursed energy, and physicals. The only factors granting Kenjaku a slight edge is that he's the confirmed greatest barrier user in the verse, with open domains and countless veils and binding vows baked into the barriers that he used in Shibuya and the Culling game. On top of this, he also enjoys 3 separate curse techniques, at least, all at once, which is only made possible due to his innate technique and its endless potential for growth. In addition, he also enjoys the perks of Geto's technique, which has similarly infinite potential. As you all must have expected, the only sorcerer who stands at the peak of S+ tier is the very same sorcerer whose power has made them into the Jujutsu Kaisen boogeyman. Ryomen Sukuna has been able to push the power system far past its reasonable bounds consistently, to the point that many fans are unable to believe what he's been able to accomplish. His raw power, skill, and versatility have thousands of fans claiming that he's essentially cheating. He is a perfect 5 out of 5 in every single metric except the curse technique, as the shrine technique hasn't proven to be able to stand up to the peak of the verse on its own, and characters like Yuta or Yuji haven't been able to derive much value from using Sukuna's technique. But luckily for him, Sukuna is such a jujutsu genius that he is able to essentially copy Kenjaku's technique after watching him turn Sukuna into 20 cursed objects and use his technique to find himself an even better technique to instantly master, upping his rating to 9 out of 5 for techniques due to the 10 shadows. The same way he was able to copy Gojo's impromptu brain surgery and Maharaga's technique target expansion. Everything Sukuna has ever done has always been while holding back to some degree, and due to the damage he suffered while slacking, it's unlikely that we'll ever see Sukuna's true potential. If conviction or resolve was a major factor in a sorcerer's skill, Sukuna most assuredly would have sunk to a lower rating. However, if there's one thing to conclude from this video, it's that Gege Akutami has made their power system a playground for hollow monsters. Thanks for watching. This video required a lot of research and basic math, so if you liked it, I'd appreciate a like or a sub for a hard-fought video that's sure to be more controversial than my average content. But either way, I hope you stay safe and take it easy.